All stories were told by people and are alleged. Believe at your discretion. Welcome back, midnight travelers. The crossroads are open once again. Tonight, we go deeper into the thick woods of New Orleans, where the ground is soft like a sponge, the air is sticky and hot, and the dead, they don't rest easy. This is the story of two boys, best friends, brave, silly, and very, very foolish. Let's dive in, beginning with the two boys who foolishly disturbed the dead. Tariq Duval. He was a 17-year-old lad with deep brown skin, like river mud after a summer rain. His hair was short, twisted coils always half dyed with leftover bleach. His eyes were slanted, mischievous, always scanning for trouble before it sees him first. Tariq was lanky but wiry, with a frame used to sprinting from cops and hopping fences. Tariq lived in a shotgun house on Desire Street, barely standing after years of storms and rot. His room was the smallest, one window, nailed half shut, a ceiling fan that never turned unless kicked. Posters of old rap legends curled at the corners from moisture. His mom worked double shifts at the hospital. His dad? Gone. Not dead, just gone. He never talked much about feelings. He laughed hard, but rarely let the laugh reach his eyes. A born follower, but not out of weakness, out of loyalty. If Jules said, "Let's go," Tariq was already putting on his shoes. But underneath the bravado lived guilt. His older brother disappeared when Tariq was 10 after trespassing into the St. Roch Cemetery. No one talked about it, but the whisper always remained. And maybe, just maybe, Tariq wanted to finish what his brother started, to prove something. Jules Martel, on the other hand, was 19 and had light copper skin, freckled. His hair was long, straight, always tied in a bun, eyes, gray, not pale but stormy, the kind that looked ancient in a certain light. Jules was the kind of kid who read tarot cards for girls behind the gym. His grandmother was a Creole root worker, half-blind, fully feared. People called her Mama Evangeline and said she once cursed a landlord's dogs to bark only in the shadows. Jules lived with her in a 2-story house filled with dried herbs, strange dolls, and jars that whispered when shaken. His room was neat, too neat, like he didn't live in it. Wooden floors, a writing desk with candles melted down to the base, tarot cards, stones, and bones in a velvet pouch. Jules never fit in. He didn't want to. He wasn't evil, but he wasn't scared either. Curiosity pulled at him like a hook behind the ribs. When he heard about Madame D's grave, he didn't laugh like Tariq. He smiled, like a key finally turning in a rusted lock. He believed in signs, in rituals, but he believed, above all, that rules were made to be tested, and no rule felt more daring than this. Do not rob the resting place of the mambo guarded by Legba. He said it out loud, and still went. Both boys were bright sparks, but fire left unattended doesn't always go out. Sometimes it spreads. It was Friday afternoon, the kind of thick August heat that made the pavement sweat and the air feel like boiled syrup. The broken bell above the corner store's door gave its usual lazy jingle as Tariq and Jules ducked in, more for the AC than anything else. Inside, the flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a jaundiced hue over aisles of dusty cereal boxes and expired potato chips. The store smelled of overripe bananas, burnt oil, and incense sticks that had long stopped being spiritual and started being camouflage for whatever stench the freezer kept leaking. The boys were not really talking, just loitering. Tariq had a grape soda in one hand and a Slim Jim dangling from his lips. Jules leaned against the freezer, flipping through a crumpled magazine left behind on the rack. That's when they heard it. From the back corner, where old men played dominoes and drank something dark out of paper bags, came a low, raspy voice. "Y'all hear about Mama Des?" Silence. Then a grunt. "Dead, finally. Heart gave out. Or maybe Legba called her home." Tariq froze. He slowly lowered the soda. Jules tilted his head, eyes narrowing like a crow who just spotted something shiny. Another voice chimed in, this one younger, sharper. "She's buried already, quick. Didn't want no mess. They sealed her up in St. Roch like they were afraid of her rising back up." Then came the whisper that stuck like molasses to the soul. "They say she was buried with her rings, all 9 of 'em, solid gold, blessed, cursed. Some say they ain't just jewelry, they keys, offerings, contracts." Laughter, a click of dominoes. "Who gon' be dumb enough to dig that grave up? That ain't just bones in there, that's a damn gate." The old men went back to their game, voices drowning beneath the hum of the cooler fan. But the seed had been planted. Outside, behind the store, later that night, Jules lit a cigarette with hands that didn't shake. Tariq paced the alley, kicking a crushed soda can with every third step. "You heard what they said," Tariq muttered. 9 gold rings." "Not just gold," Jules corrected. "Vivis carved into them. Keys." Tariq rolled his eyes. "Man, you really believe all that voodoo shit?" "Shh." Jules blew out smoke, watching it swirl. "You remember Madame Des? You saw her house, the offerings, the people who lined up just to get a charm or a reading?" Tariq nodded. "Yeah, she was something. Used to scare my mom just walking past her porch." Jules flicked the ash. "Those rings weren't for show. They were power. Bargains she made. And now she's dead. The door's open." Tariq scratched his neck, uneasy. "You saying we'd take them?" Jules turned, eyes gleaming even in the half-light. "I'm saying we collect." Silence. A distant train whistle cut through the air like a warning. Tariq hesitated, then smiled, the kind of grin people wear right before they fall off the edge. "All right, let's rob a grave." And so it began. Not out of greed alone, but out of temptation, curiosity, and the belief, so common among the young, that consequences are just old people's ghosts. Madame de Rouleau, the woman, the witch, the gatekeeper. She lived at the very edge of the 9th Ward, just where the cracked asphalt gave way to swampy green and the trees grew thick with Spanish moss. Her house sat alone, a sagging wooden cottage with blood-red shutters, wind chimes made from bones, and veves painted in salt across the porch. No one really knew how old she was. Some said she had once been a girl during the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927. Others swore she'd been seen in photographs older than photography itself. But one thing was always certain. Mama Des never aged, her back never bent, her eyes never dulled, and her voice, when she spoke, could quiet thunder. She wore long black lace dresses, even in the heat. Her skin the color of mahogany carved smooth by time. Her silver dreadlocks wrapped in vibrant scarlet cloth. Around her neck, a chain of small glass bottles, each holding things no one wanted to ask about. And on her fingers, 9 golden rings, each different, each humming with a quiet, watchful energy. One shaped like a coiled serpent, one with a tiny gate etched into the band, one with a red stone that pulsed when the moon was full. She never explained them, never removed them, not even in sleep. Her cottage smelled of cinnamon, burnt offerings, and dried flowers. Inside, it was darker than it should have been. The windows stayed curtained, the air always carried the sound of a distant bell, though no one could ever find the source. The kitchen was filled with jars, some labeled, some not. Bird skulls, dried herbs, marinated roots, candles that burn blue. And a mirror in every room, always covered in red cloth unless she was expecting company. She took visitors at dusk. Women with barren wombs, men with shaking hands, children haunted by sleepwalks and whispers, and they always left lighter, changed, sometimes healed, sometimes hollowed out. She died quietly, in her bed, eyes closed, fingers clasped over her chest, still wearing all 9 rings. The neighbor who found her swore there were no flies, no smell of rot, just a warm hush, like the air itself was holding its breath. They buried her the very next morning, no ceremony, no choir, only a small gathering of the old, those who remembered, and one priestess who drew veves around the grave and poured rum at each corner of the tomb. They say Madame de Sand had made her last bargain. Her death wasn't an end. It was a passage, a door sealed from one side and left open on the other. And now Tariq and Jules, ignorant of all this weight, have cracked that door open again. The night of the break-in. It was just past midnight. The air in New Orleans was thick and warm, like a wet blanket you couldn't shake off. Crickets chirped. Somewhere far off, a train rumbled. The moon was bright, but clouds kept moving across it like slow ghosts. Tariq and Jules stood at the edge of St. Roch Cemetery, hands sweaty, hearts racing. Tariq had the crowbar. Jules held the flashlight. Both boys wore dark clothes and hoodies, like that would somehow make them invisible. Their backpacks were half full, with gloves, a shovel, a bottle of rum, and a little courage. Jules whispered, "You sure it's this one?" Tariq nodded. "Yeah. That old man said, 3rd row from the gate, left side, cracked headstone." They walked in slowly. The iron gates creaked behind them. Gravel crunched under their feet. All around them, the graves stood like crooked teeth, leaning in the dark. Then they saw it. A marble headstone, worn by time, covered in moss. The name read, Eloise de Rilot, 95 years. Someone had left a bundle of flowers at the base, old, dry, and falling apart. Strange symbols were carved into the stone. One looked like a spider web with tiny keys hanging from it. Jules pointed. "That's the voodoo symbol, right? For, what's his name?" Tariq replied, "Papa Legba, yeah." They paused. Just for a second. But the gold was on their minds. They'd heard the story from an old man behind the corner store. His eyes were white like fog. He talked like he was speaking to ghosts.
He said, "She was buried with her rings, 9 of 'em, real gold, worth more than your mama's car. But be careful, protected by Papa. A fool's gonna lose more than fingers touching her grave." They thought he was crazy. They thought he was lying. But now, here they were. Tariq took a deep breath and stuck the crowbar into the crack between the stone and the earth. With a grunt, he pushed. Crack! The stone shifted. Another push, another crack. And then it opened. The smell hit them first. Old earth, dried herbs, and something sweet like decaying flowers. Inside the grave lay a small, fragile body, dressed in black lace. Her hands were crossed over her chest. Her fingers, thin and bony, were covered in 9 rings that shimmered even in the moonlight. The boys froze. The rings were real. Thick gold, some shaped like snakes, some carved with tiny gates, twisted symbols, and red stones that seemed to glow. Tariq moved first. He took 4. Jules grabbed the other 5. And then the wind stopped. Dead silence. No crickets. No train. Even the air felt wrong. Too heavy, like the sky was sitting on their backs. Then they heard it. A soft click, like a cane tapping stone. They looked around. No one there, just tombstones and shadows. They didn't wait. They ran, fast, jumped the gate, didn't speak a word until they got home. And when they finally stopped to breathe, when they looked at the rings again, they smiled. They laughed. They thought they'd gotten away with it. But the dead don't sleep easy, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed.
Tariq's house sat on the edge of the neighborhood, past the old train tracks and across from a tire shop that never closed. It was quiet that night. His mom, a nurse, had picked up a night shift at Charity Hospital. She wouldn't be back until morning. The lights were off, except for the soft orange glow from the street lamp outside. It poured through the curtains, painting slow-moving shadows across the room. Tariq slid the window open, and Jules climbed through, careful not to knock over the fan that buzzed on the floor. They didn't speak at first, just sat cross-legged on the carpet, backs against the bed, panting. Tariq finally whispered, "You saw how it looked, right? That road?" Jules nodded. "Yeah, it was like, I don't know, like the world bent." Tariq reached into his backpack and pulled out the rings. The gold gleamed even in the dim room. Jules placed his set on the floor, too. 9 rings total, arranged in a messy circle between them. One ring had a tiny black stone. Another had snakes coiled around it, mouths open. One of them was shaped like a gate, twisted and sharp like barbed wire. They stared. Tariq ran his fingers across his lips. "We need to get rid of them, not like throwaway gone. I mean sold, fast." Jules nodded. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Tariq looked up, one eyebrow raised. Gade's Hollow. It was a small, shady town about 2 hours away, full of pawn shops, backroom gamblers, and places that didn't ask questions, especially about where things came from. "We'd tell them we got 'em from a guy who owed us. No grave talk, no voodoo, just quick cash. We split it, disappear, and nobody knows." Tariq nodded slowly. "We'll take the bus in the morning, 7 a.m. We don't wear nothing flashy. Keep the rings wrapped up." Jules grinned. "Man, we're gonna be rich." But the grin faded fast, because the room suddenly felt cold. Too cold. Like the fan was blowing straight from a freezer. And then the bulb in the ceiling flickered. Once. Twice. And went out.
They sat there, frozen. No sound, no crickets now, just the soft click, click, click of something tapping on the window glass behind them. They turned slowly. Nothing was there, only the night outside. But the rings? They were glowing. Just faintly, just enough to make the gold look alive. Tariq whispered, "We go to Geddes Hollow, first thing tomorrow." Jules nodded, more serious now. "And we don't wear them. We don't touch them unless we have to." Tariq stood and shoved the rings into a sock, then tied it up tight and hid it under his bed. "Don't dream about her. Or him." Tariq didn't answer, but his eyes kept drifting to the window, to that street lamp outside. It was flickering now, too. Geddes Hollow, where things disappear. The town of Geddes Hollow didn't look like much during the day. It was cloudy when the boys arrived. The air was wet, and the street smelled like old beer, fish grease, and something sour hiding in the drains. Most buildings were run down, paint peeling, signs faded. Old ladies watched from upstairs windows like they were waiting on something bad. Or maybe they knew it was already here. Tariq wore a hoodie. Jules wore sunglasses too big for his face. The sock full of rings was deep in Tariq's backpack, wrapped in an old t-shirt. They went to the first pawn shop, Zeke's Quick Cash and Gun Repair. The shop smelled like burnt metal and bad cologne. The man behind the counter was bald, with eyes too bright for his age. He looked them up and down with zero interest. Tariq pulled out 3 rings, placing them gently on the scratched glass counter. "Solid gold," he said. "Antique." Zeke stared at the rings for too long. His face didn't move, but something in his eyes shifted. He stepped back, wiped his hands on a cloth, and reached under the counter. Jules tensed. But Zeke didn't pull a gun. He pulled out a box of salt and started pouring a thick white line across the counter between himself and the rings. Then he said, low and sharp, "Y'all don't belong here, and neither do those." Tariq blinked. "We just want a price." Zeke cut him off. "Ain't no price for cursed gifts. Go, before you bring more flies through my door." He shoved the rings back toward them with a wooden spoon, then tossed a handful of salt toward their feet. The boys left in silence. Out on the sidewalk, Jules cursed under his breath. "Man, what the hell was that?" "Paranoid freak," Tariq muttered. But he was shaking, not from fear, yet, but from something else. The air felt heavy again. The clouds above looked darker now. That's when they heard a voice behind them. Zeke always was a coward. They turned. An old man in a gray coat stood near the corner. His hair was wild, beard stained yellow. He had a long scar across his cheek, shaped like a forked tree branch. He leaned on a twisted cane. "Those rings," he said, his voice low and slow, "aren't for pawn shops. They're for gates. But there's a place." Tariq and Jules said nothing. The man smiled. "No windows, no signs. Just knock on the black door behind Rita's chicken shack. Ask for Mr. Arnaud. Don't speak unless he asks. Don't look him in the eyes. And if he offers you a deal, take it quick." Then the man limped away, whistling something that didn't sound like a song at all.
The black door. Behind Rita's chicken shack, past the flies and grease bins, there was a door. Black, iron, rusted. No handle, no bell. Just the outline of a keyhole long since sealed shut. Tariq knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. Then, click, The door swung open. The hallway inside was lit by candles stuck into whiskey bottles. The walls were red. The air smelled like herbs, sweat, and wax. They walked in. At the far end of the hall was a room filled with old books, jars full of cloudy liquid, and mirrors covered in black cloth. And in the center, sitting in a tall chair, was Mr. Arnaud. He was short, pale, bald, wearing a red suit that didn't quite fit, like it had been borrowed from someone larger. His lips were black like ink, and one eye was made of glass. He didn't stand, didn't blink, just said, "You have something that doesn't belong to you." Jules stepped forward, slow and careful. He opened the sock and showed the rings. Arnaud stared at them. His glass eye shimmered yellow for a second. Then he stood. "You want money?" he asked. Tariq nodded. "Cash, all of it." Mr. Arnaud laughed, low and bitter. "These rings are worth more than money, but money is what you'll settle for." He snapped his fingers. A woman walked in. Her face was hidden behind a silk veil. She carried a briefcase locked with 3 brass latches. Arnaud opened it. Inside were stacks of bills, hundreds, fresh, smelled of ink and heat. He held the case open. "Take it." Jules reached forward. "But wait," Arnaud said. "One more thing." He stepped close, too close. He leaned in, his breath cold and sour. "You stole from the Loa. You broke a bond sealed in death. You have been seen, touched, marked. This money, it is not yours. It is a delay. Spend it quick, live fast, because the gate is already open." The boys didn't say anything. They took the case, shoved the rings across the table, and left without looking back. The black door slammed shut behind them. They didn't see Arnaud lick the blood off one of the rings. They didn't see the mirrors under the cloth twitch like something behind them was breathing. They didn't hear the woman whisper, "Papa knows."
The brothel nights. They didn't go home right away. For 2 nights, Tariq and Jules stayed hidden in a run-down brothel on the edge of Jedeh's Hollow, called the Velvet Root. The sign outside was missing a letter, and the lights flickered like they were scared to stay on too long. Inside, it smelled of cigarette ash, cheap perfume, and secrets. The kind of place where nobody asked questions so long as you paid in cash. They spent carefully, just enough for drinks, food, and the company of women who had tired eyes and painted smiles. They laughed too loud, acted like kings, pretended they weren't 17, and cursed. But on the second night, something changed. Jules was in a dark red room, stretched out on a torn velvet couch, when his girl suddenly froze mid-laugh. She turned slowly toward the mirror on the wall, the one that had always been covered with a scarf, and whispered, "Who's the man in the hat?" There was no man, not in the room, but Jules saw him in the mirror. A tall figure in the corner, wide-brimmed hat, eyes like dying candles. His coat swayed as if underwater. He was smiling with teeth that didn't end. When Jules turned around, nothing. When he turned back to the mirror, no reflection at all. He was up in seconds, grabbing Tariq. "No more," he said. "We're going home." They rushed back to town just before sunrise. The sky was gray, the kind of sky that made shadows look wrong. They split the cash in Tariq's bedroom, counted it like it wasn't poison. "Hide it," Tariq told Jules. "Somewhere even your dreams won't find it." Jules nodded. And we lay low, real low. That day, Jules went back to the barber shop where he swept hair for tips. Tariq helped his uncle fix tires at the auto shop. They were acting normal, but nothing was normal anymore. The beginning
of the end. That night, Jules was in bed when he heard the creak of his bedroom door. "Ma?" he called. No answer. Then, soft footsteps on the floor. But what shook him wasn't the sound, it was the smell. Wet dirt, burnt sugarcane, old bones. Then, a whisper from the foot of the bed. "You took what was sealed in death." Jules sat up fast, heart pounding, but he couldn't move. Something had his ankles. Out from the shadows came a black hand, veined in silver, holding a twisted cane. And behind it, Papa Legba. In his full form, hat wide, coat trailing behind him like fog, face painted in skull white, lips black, eyes deep enough to drown in. "You made a deal you never understood," Legba said, voice like gravel and smoke. "Now the date swings open both ways." He didn't shout, he didn't strike. He tapped Jules's forehead once with the tip of the cane. Just once. Jules screamed so loud the neighbor's dog dropped dead. When his mother ran into the room, he was shaking, crying, speaking in a voice that wasn't his, a language nobody could understand. And his left hand? Gone. Black. Like it had rotted overnight. It started with the left hand. By dawn, it was black, swollen, the skin cracked like dried leather. When his mother touched it, he screamed, not from pain, but from the way it felt cold from the inside. Like death had taken root under the skin, not over it. She tried ointments, salt baths, prayers, holy water. But the rot laughed at those things. By the second night, his lips turned purple. His teeth loosened. He stopped eating, not because he didn't want to, but because the food turned to ash in his mouth. His mother wept quietly at his door, whispering the Lord's Prayer over and over until her lips bled. But Jules would only lay in bed, trembling and muttering a name she didn't recognize. "Papa Legba. Papa." The local doctor said it was necrosis. The priest said it was the devil. But she knew. None of them understood. In desperation, she traveled 3 towns away to find a man her mother once warned her about, a forgotten voodoo priest named Tiban Loa. They said he didn't blink when he spoke, that he could hear the dead if you stayed silent long enough. She found him behind a rusted church bell and an altar of feathers and bones. His hut smelled of molasses, salt, and something worse, something buried. He didn't ask her name, just looked at her and said, "Your boy cracked open a sealed grave, didn't he?" She gasped. "He took what wasn't his, and now the gatekeeper has him." She begged for a cure. Tiban Loa only shook his head. "You don't cure a boy who borrowed death. You returned what he took, or pay the toll in flesh."
By the 5th day, Jules couldn't speak. His eyes had gone gray, his skin peeled in strips from his arms like damp paper. His back arched unnaturally, spasming every few hours like something inside him was trying to crawl out. He scratched symbols into the wall, not words, gate sigils, crossroad signs. His mother stopped sleeping. She just sat and watched him rot, watched as a teenage boy she once cradled, whispered prayers to a Loa she didn't know how to love or fear. Then came the night his breath stopped. Only it didn't, because even after the silence, Jules sat up, face hollow, eyes blind, but smiling. He reached out his blackened hand and whispered, "He's in the room, Mama." And just before she passed out from terror, she saw it too. A tall shadow near the mirror, holding a twisted cane. Tarek thought he was safe. He hadn't seen anything weird. No dreams, no shadows. Until that 6th morning. He looked in the mirror while brushing his teeth and saw Jules behind him. But Jules's eyes were rolled back and blood was dripping from his ears. Tariq turned. No one there. Then came the whispers. In the shower, in the socket where his charger used to be, in the wind that blew through a closed window. "Run all you want," it said. "He doesn't chase, he waits." Tariq stopped eating, stopped talking. Even his mom noticed. He stayed up for 48 hours straight until he saw his wall bleed the words, "You opened the gate." And at exactly 3:33 a.m., Tariq finally saw him. Legba was sitting at the edge of his bed, playing with the 9 rings like marbles. He didn't speak. He just smiled. Then one by one, the rings melted into the floor, sizzling like oil in fire. And Tariq, he started screaming and never, ever stopped. Tariq sat on the floor of his bedroom, hands shaking, eyes bloodshot. It had been 3 nights since Jules stopped answering texts, 2 nights since the rot began, 1 night since Jules's mother had shown up screaming in the street, carrying her son's hair in a rag soaked with blood. Tariq knew. He knew the moment he looked into his reflection and saw his own mouth moving, but heard nothing. No sound, no voice, no breath. Just a whisper behind him. One left.
The confession. Tariq finally broke. He ran to his grandmother, Mama Evangeline, a small, fierce woman with bones wrapped in tradition and hair long enough to sweep the spirits off her porch. He told her everything, how they'd heard about Madame de Rouleau's death, how they'd pried open her tomb, how they'd sold the rings in Guede's Hollow, the brothel, the pawn shop, the salt, the dogs. Mama Evangeline didn't interrupt once. She only lit a thick black candle, pulled out a red scarf, and began muttering in Creole beneath her breath. When he finished, she didn't look angry. She looked terrified. "You fools stole from Legba himself," she whispered, eyes wide. "You don't touch the keys at the gate. You don't rob the dead who paid for safe passage." She wrapped his head in white cloth and made him kneel. "We can beg," she said, "but begging don't always bring mercy." That night, Mama Evangeline prepared an offering. She laid out 3 coins, a bottle of rum, a crossroad made from palm ash, and Tariq's voice captured in a jar, whispers recorded during a fever dream, the last time he spoke aloud. At midnight, she walked him barefoot to the crossroads near Bayou Marais, a place the old one said Legba passed through on stormy nights. She called his name, in full, 3 times. "Papa Legba, keeper of the gate, open the way." Wind picked up. The flame on the candle flickered blue. She poured the rum, laid the coins, offered her own blood with a silver pin. The wind stopped. A silence fell. Tariq looked at Mama Evangeline. She was frozen, eyes wide, breathing fast. "He's here," she whispered. "Don't move, don't think, just feel." The flame went out, and something cold wrapped around Tariq's ankle. He gasped, finally finding his voice, and screamed. 1,000 whispers swirled around him. A gate opened. He could see it. A tall one, made of bones and braided hair, with golden keys floating like fireflies. Then, slam. It shut. Judgment is past. Tariq woke up hours later, mouth filled with dirt, fingernails bloody from clawing at the earth. The offerings were gone. Mama Evangeline was kneeling, staring at the road, silent. And burned into the ground, at the very center of the ash cross, was Legba's vase, but altered. One of the keys was broken. "No deal," she whispered. Voice hollow. No gate opened, no forgiveness given. She pulled Tariq close and whispered, "He's going to take you slow. Not like Jules. You're going to feel it." And Tariq knew. The punishment had begun. Tariq of the Tombs. Years passed. People forgot about the pawn shop, about Jules, about the rings, about the grave that had once been cracked open in the dead of night. But one thing, one soul, remained: Tariq. Now no longer a boy, not quite a man either, just a figure hunched beneath the crumbling arches of St. Roch's Cemetery, his shadow stretched long against chipped headstones and crumbling mausoleums. His eyes were milky white, yet they moved fast, as if chasing things no one else could see. He never spoke of his own past, only of others. They called him Gate Boy. Children dared each other to get close. He'd sit by the cracked statue of the weeping angel, whispering stories into a bone flute, or scribbling vaves into the dirt with a chicken bone. The brave ones claimed he could tell you when you'd die. The foolish ones said he could bring someone back for a price. But no matter the story, they all agreed. He never left the cemetery. Not even once. He told the tales of the in-betweens. On nights when the fog was thick and the jazz from the quarter had a strange hollow echo, people swore they could hear him talking. Not yelling, not singing, but talking. Soft, fast, and low. Some come back with a shadow behind them. Some walk the crossroads and never find their way out. And some, he'd tap his chest right over where his heart should be. Some still owe, still pay. He told of souls bartered for fame, of babies marked in the womb by forgotten gods, of priests who hung their collars on hooks and bowed to something older in the dark. And always, always, he ended with the same whisper: "Don't open what the dead lock shut." Old folks say he died at least 3 times, once by fever, once by fire, once by drowning, face down in the old bayou. Each time he came back, each time a part of him stayed behind. His left eye grew black, his voice rasped like dry leaves. His shadow sometimes walked away from him and returned later with wet footprints. Some say Papa Legba spared him, made him a griot of the graves, a storyteller of the stolen, the cursed, the damned. Not alive, not dead, just paying. And on stormy nights when thunder rips the sky and the rain washes clean the names on the tombstones, some still go to him to hear the stories, to make bargains, to ask about someone they lost. But beware, because Tariq always asks the same question at the end. Do you have a coin? If you do, he'll smile. If you don't, he'll just look up at the sky and murmur, then walk. The gate is closed, and Legba is listening. Sleep if you can, with your eyes open like the dead.